A short time in the hosier mill, and then a little later on went in the cotton mill.
But that was when you were 14. You went direct. So if you could tell us, we moved because of the boll weevil.
Yeah, okay. Tell that over.
We had to move because of the boll weevil. We moved into town.
Yeah.
I was 14. I was old enough to work, and I started to work because we didn't know what age you were when you told us that story.
Yeah, okay. You ready?
Yes, okay.
Okay, whenever I boll weevils, the reason we went to cotton mill work was in 1923, the boll weevils drove us out of the country. And we had to go out of the country to get somewhere where we could make a living. And we moved to Newnan, Georgia, and I was 14 years old enough to go to work in the mill. And I went to work shortly after we moved to Newnan, maybe a month or two. I went to work on the 26th day of December, 1923. And so I went to work in the mill, in the hosier mill. And now, I worked there just a short time. I think I made 50 cents a day at working when I was working. I'm not sure about that. But when I went to the hospital, at the cotton mill in early 1924, I remember that. And I was 14 years old. I'd have been 15 in July when I went to work early in the year. But I went to work in the mill, and I said I went to work for the fabulous salary of $5.18 for 60 hours. Worked 60 hours for it. And but the boll weevil was the cause of every bit of it. But I thought that was a good salary. I thought I was going to be able to support the whole family with that $5.18. So you see, time changes. Now they think about if they're going to give a fella $5.18 an hour, he still wouldn't want the job. And then I'd work 60 hours for it.
That's right.
But anyway, we were satisfied. Even in the years that we didn't have no picture show, we didn't have no screen doors, we didn't have no screen windows. And I remember when we didn't even have a glass window. You shut the windows like you do a door. And but we was happy. We didn't know no better. We didn't know nothing else. And television, radio, telephone, nothing. We had nothing like that. No electric lights.
Talk about your first radio.
First radio, we lived in East Newnan. It was 1925 when we got our first radio. My brother, he was working, and he bought that first radio. And he gave something over $100 for it. It was an Atwater Kent. And you had a speaker that you could put anywhere you wanted to. And Daddy would have a radio in the other room and have a speaker in the room where we was at. But now we enjoyed that radio because it was just a wonderful thing. And then many people had one. So we really had account meetings at our house a lot of times for the get to listen to the radio. The fights of Jack Dempsey and the different prize fighters and things. They'd come over the radio. And boy, it was wonderful. We thought we was living up in sticks then,
Tell us about the first time you heard Roosevelt on the radio.
Yes, whenever he was running, but I just
It started to mention Roosevelt.
Yeah, well, whenever Roosevelt first would run, I don't remember just exactly, but he'd come on the radio. Too many people had radios, but he was a man that began to give people hope from the very first words he ever spoke, because he was a man that was crippled all of his life. Well, it wasn't all of his life, but he got crippled when he was young, and he knowed hardship, and he had sympathy and heart for poor people. He wanted to help poor people. And therefore, he won the heart of poor people right to start with on the radio and everything. And then he had what they call whistle stops. He'd come through the town and wouldn't get off the train, just get on the back and stop. And he just won people everywhere he went. Roosevelt was a great speaker, and he was a great statesman, and he was the right man at the right time.
Certainly was. Certainly was.
I wonder about those Fireside Chats. If you were the only house in the neighborhood that had a radio,
well,
did people come to hear the Fireside Chats?
Yes, whenever he'd have the Fireside Chats, sometime it would come out in the paper that he was going to have one, ahead of time. And then you can go hear in them. And he talked more just like he was talking to his family, and he was at the Fireside Chapel. He was just talking to his family and telling them what hardships was and everything, And now he had them even after he was elected president for years and years. If he wanted something to go over, he'd have a Fireside Chat and to get the people on his side. And that was the purpose of the Fireside Chat, to get people to agree with him and realize what he was standing for and what he was wanting to be done.
You remember when he closed the banks?
Yeah, I remember when he closed the banks. Roosevelt in 1932, you know, it was when he was elected, it was during the Depression years. It was a terrible years. Everybody had this, everybody was done retired then, you know, nobody had to work. So they always had to wrote out that when Hoover taking his seat, everybody else did too, you know. That's what they said, you know. Of course, it was laid on him, and I don't believe now it was. But anyway, he'd have them fireside chats to tell people about them things, you know, and people would respond to him. And so you had, I mean, they was ready for a change. People was ready for a change. Anybody could have been elected other than what was in there. They was ready for a change. And, you know, we get that way sometimes. We get ready for a change. Sometimes we make a mistake by doing it, but we get ready for it sometime, and we want the change to be made. And he was a man that could turn the water, turn the tide.
Did you ever write to him?
Not personally, no. I never did write to him. I spoke to him and talked to him personally, but I never did write to him.
Talk about.
Well, he
How
never.
did it happen?
What he would do would
mentioned Roosevelt.
When Roosevelt was going to go through a town, they would always put it ahead that he was going to go through there, and he would go through. And if he didn't, people would meet. I mean, they'd gang up like it did on a Mystic Day to see Roosevelt come through town. And he would stop sometime a few minutes and spare a few words to people, but he didn't have time to really greet people like, you know, he would have loved to, and like we'd have loved to. But everybody just loved him. And you'd go for miles to hear see Roosevelt even come through town, you know. So he was. I thought it was a great thing whenever I seen him and talked to him and told him I was sponsoring him and pulling for him and everything like that. But he, like I said, you couldn't have much personal talk with him.
Did you ever hear Gorman speak?
No, sir, I never did hear Gorman speak. I heard of him, but I never did hear him speak.
Because he used a radio too.
Yeah, he used a radio. Yeah. But they was very few radios back in them days, you know.
Did you hear Roosevelt talk about the NRA on the radio?
Oh yeah.
Blue Eagle. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, he convinced people that NRA that was you know, it was what we was going. In other words, we were going to go into a new program. It was sort of like going from the Old Testament to the New Testament. We had a different will we was living under. And he began to explain what that new deal was for and how it would be. And it was great. It was a great inspiration to the people. And as I said, he first started out, you know, with the CC camps, sending boys to CC camp. And, you know, a lot of families would support for them boys at CC camp. Then he started the relief program, we call it, you know, where you have jobs. He said, folks don't want to, they want to work. They don't want to, you know, just to have charity handed to them. So we had different projects we worked on. Now, one time I worked on in the cemetery in Union. I worked in PWA, worked in the cemetery in Union, and I'd work so many hours each week, you know, and get 30 cents an hour, I believe it was, what we'd get for it. But anyway, it was a lifesaver. And that Clark Street in Union, I helped pave that street. I pushed cement with a wheelbar on Clark Street in Union, and under the PWA, under Roosevelt. So it was a great thing that he did, and that was part of the beginning to bring the NRA into focus, to get people to have confidence and to believe in what he said and to do what he told them to do. And he generally talked people into doing what he wanted done.
Now, that same feeling of inspiration and hope, is that what the textile workers felt when they said, yes, I'm going to join the union? And could you talk about that?
How him giving us hope?
Yeah, and how did that hope affect people to join the union?
Well, as far as joining the union is concerned, I don't know how that helped people. I hope unless they got the impression that he was strictly for a union. And therefore, they wanted to do what Roosevelt said. Anything that Roosevelt said is what they wanted to do. And so they got the impression that he was for the union. Now, he never did come out and say he was for the union, but he was in favor of people getting equal rights and equal treatment and the right treatment and everything, which the union did represent. So it sounded like that was what he was advocating, although he did not say, I want you to join the union. But he did say at one time, you ought to have the right to organize if you want to. He did say that.
You've got it right. And a lot of people were misled.
Misled.
You're quite right. He's got it absolutely right. Yeah.
Now, I met a young woman who who's a union organizer, a couple of months ago, I was in Cincinnati actually with George. George was showing some of his old movies to people. And she said to me, Judy, you know, people don't just wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm going to join up.
No.
You know, something has to happen there. She said, what happened? I said, I don't know what happened. She said, well, you go down south and find out what was going on there to make people get the guts to join. So if you could help us get inside of that a little bit, it would be great.
Well, I think the reason why one thing is like people join the union, just like I said to start with, they was first wanting some better themselves. They had been at the bottom of the barrel so long that they was grabbing at straws. They wanted to get out of anything, and that gave them some hope and some far-sighted idea that they could get things better. And that's the main thing. It convinced people that they ought to organize, because they understood that one man controlled the mills and could fire, hire, and anything, and they needed a bunch of people to get together where one man couldn't have the control. And I think that was the idea of them wanting to join the union. It was talked over and discussed, and well, you know, in other words, a person would come up to you and to say, well, you know, the boss done so-and-so to me. Yeah, if you belonged to the union, they wouldn't do that. They couldn't do you that way if you belonged to the union. And therefore, they just won it over by saying things like that. You know, they couldn't have fired you that way if you'd have belonged to the union. They couldn't have done that to you.
Now, were there black people in the union?
No, sir, I never did know of no black people being, because at that particular time, black people did not work in the mills. We didn't have any black people in the mills, because the South they was prejudiced at that time. Now, I never was. We was raised on the farm, and we was raised with colored people. I played with colored children and everything else all my life. My dad and them always taught us not to discriminate against because they were different color, but they did tell us not to mix with them, you know, and racially and things like that. But we was not taught to discriminate against a colored person. But at that time, if they'd have put a colored person in the mill work, everybody else had walked out. So they was not in the union at that time. Not in the South.
Very useful. Yeah, good.
I wonder about self-esteem.
About what?
How people felt about themselves. If you worked under somebody that had so much control over you, how did that make people feel emotionally?
Well, it made you feel like it.
Could you start describe how someone worked over you?
Well, if somebody was over you and they had so much authority over you, you felt like you was more of a slave than you was a free worker. You felt like when I'm here, I'm under his control. And you was under their control. And you had to do what they told you to do, do what they told you not to do it. And you could go or come whenever you wanted to. Now, when you went home, they still didn't have control over you, but you felt like that, well, if I do anything here, like I said, if you do anything that was illegal, like drinking or something like that, it would cause you later to get fired. So, you see, you felt like that you was sort of a slave, like in a way, sense of speaking. You was a slave to what you was working under, you know. And that therefore you wanted, anybody that's a slave wants freedom.
Now, did you ever, when you're working at the machine, what did you dream about doing?
Well, the biggest thing, when I was working on the machinery, most of the time that I was dreamed about and studied about while I was on the machinery was a shorter way to do what I was doing. But so I could get it done quicker and have more leisure time. And I would try to figure out a different, shorter, better way to do whatever I was doing. Even when I got the job of working on the machinery, they'd show me the way it wasn't done, and I went straight studying a way to get to it quicker. And a general way you can find it, a way to get to it quicker. And even when I was learning that, I'd tell them, so-and-so can do that quicker than you can. And fellas say, well, you got the right idea, you need to do it the quickest way you know how. And that was my main thought in working on machinery or any other part I was working on, was how to get it done quicker with less effort.
Now, you've been in church all your life,
yeah.
I noticed. Could you talk about the churches and the unions and the bosses and what it was like in?
Well, I don't think that the union ever really got in churches. I don't think that ever really. I think a union stayed out of the churches. I never did hear of nobody getting any kind of confusion in the church. But now, as I said, I worked with one time when we worked at East Noonan, we had a superintendent by the name of I can't even think of his name now. But anyway, the superintendent, he thought that, I mean, he almost told you where to go to church at. But we didn't all listen at him. We went where we wanted to go when we was out of the mill because they wouldn't fire us for it. But as far as the union and thing affecting the church, I can't say that it ever affected the church any.
What about the employer?
Well, the employers, I don't know. I don't reckon it ever affected them either. I don't know. I wouldn't say that it ever affected them any other than just that they was one on one side and you was on the other.
They contributed, though.
Oh, yeah. They contributed by doing what they was told to do, just like anybody else, you know.
Okay.
Okay.
Julie?
Yeah. Did you know that the strike? Did you understand? You knew that. Did everyone in the village know that the strike was national and was happening all over the country?
Yeah. Whenever the general strike come, the one you're talking about, everybody knew it was the strike was in general. Thought it was everywhere, but each plant waited till the squad come through and shut them down before they closed each plant. That squad went through and closed each plant down. And then they'd leave it if they closed it down, you know, but they'd leave pickets on the line and close it down. But everybody knew in general it was a general strike called the whole textile industry, you know, was called on strike.
Did you ever go to the movies?
Yeah, I went to movies a lot. Yeah, I used to be a real movie fan back whenever I was a child because we didn't have nothing else. Of course, I remember back whenever they nothing but black, white, no talking and nothing else. You had to read what you said, you know. But anyhow, I enjoyed going to movies. I went to movies every chance you got. And
Did you ever see any movies of the strike?
No, not other than something of the strike personally, other than what we saw on slides like y'all showed us of where the troops come and carried people in. About the only thing I ever seen of the strike in the union, about the union.
There was no newsreel in the show.
They didn't have, we didn't have televisions and things, and you didn't see newsreels much in them days. They just do. In other words, you got it by hearing on the radio, a word of mouth. You didn't get anything but newsreels because there was no television, nothing to give them on, you know. So.
I think we should go to the documents.
Okay.
Okay. You want to read it out loud?
Oh, you want to read it out loud? I better get my glasses in.
Shall I get in?
Speed.
Okay, Arthur. When the strike was over, do you think the union did anything for you?
I really don't believe they did. I really don't believe they did anything for us. I think it was just a wasted cause. I think the union actually just wiped us off after the strike was over because they couldn't organize, and they said they'd go somewhere where they could get more sympathy and more organization.
Now, I'm going to show you some documents that we found in the National Archives. Here's one of them that's dated October the 2nd, 1934, filed by S.A. Houlihan, director of the Textile Strikers Headquarters, 91 Trinity Avenue in Atlanta. And it says, I wish to make a complaint of union discrimination in violation of Section 7A of the National Industrial Recovery Act against the Noonan Cotton Mills, number 2, Noonan, Georgia. And it says down here, the following are the names of some of the workers that have been refused employment and are victims of union discrimination. And Arthur, down here is your name among several others that are listed here. You see that? And you'll find your name listed. Just turn it over and you'll see it.
Okay.
You see your name listed?
Yeah.
Maybe you want to get your glasses so you can see it.
Yeah, in this particular place, I see they have got my name listed as a card in the card room of the complaint about the discrimination about the union did for the workers and didn't do for the workers after the strike was over. And this complaint, I still, after we got this complaint in there, like I said, it never was anything done on it. And this is the one I was speaking of earlier about my daddy being in that trial. And they had him, you know, he was one of them that was put up in the trial. And they fired him because he didn't wear a mustache, and they fired Mr. Arthur Ayers because he wore a mustache. And they made it stick. Judge Freeman had enough of power and enough authority that he could make them kind of things stick.
So even though the union did protest,
yeah.
It didn't do any good.
Didn't do any good. In other words, the power of Judge Freeman overruled anything that the union tried to do.
Now, here is another document I have from the Union Cotton Mills sent in to the government, dated November the 13th, 1934, and it says, on Friday, August the 31st, 1934, the following statement was circulated among all our employees. And it says, to our employees. You might want to read that. Do you remember getting such a document?
In this particular time, on November 13, 1934, this document that I have in my presence here now, I don't remember seeing that document. I don't remember us having anything about it. I'm sure that probably some of the head officials of the union did, but as far as me personally, I didn't see this document. I didn't read it.
Did you get any warning from the employers before that strike that you shouldn't strike?
Well, we did on July the 4th, before the strike was come off. They gave a barbecue, and in other words, they didn't come right out and say you cannot join the union. The officials didn't speaking, but they give us warning that they would not be buckled under to the union organization. So we did have a warning from July the 4th of 1934, before the strike. They did give the employees a warning that they was not going to recognize it.
Here is something else that you might like to see. Speaking about evictions. You want to read that?
Then this document here was written by Gus Crawford. I know him very well, and this I reckon he sent this document in to him. But it says the mill desired to have a procession of the premises now occupied by you at 9 Field Street, and you are hereby notified to vacate one on this Saturday, March the 23rd. Now, this was Gus Crawford. I remember him, and I remember him getting this document. I remember him getting this particular document. But me, personally, they didn't give me a document. They did tell me they would like for me to vacate the house, but I never was contrary to them, and they never did press me too hard. They give me time to get a place to get out. So they was fair with me on that particular issue.
Why do you think they did that to Crawford and not to you?
Well, I think it because he was front man up. Crawford taking so much front leadership in it and worked so hard against people, the company and everything, till I think that they more or less used Gus Crawford as an example more than they used him as a personal man. They used him as an example. And this one they got R.O. Spradlin, East Noonan. I knowed some Spradlins at East Noonan at that time, but I don't remember whether it was R.O. or not. It says the mill desires to have the procession of premises occupy you at 17 Freeman Street. I know where that was at, and they notified, but they give him the same document to vacate by March the 23rd, 1935. But now I did vacate my house in April, about the middle of April in 1935. I give them my house about the middle of April 1935. This is J.M. Agnew, I know them. It says the mill desires to have the premises at 23 Hill Street, and you are hereby notified. And all these got the same document to vacate by the 23rd of March. And I didn't get one of these, but I do know several people that did get them, and I know these people. It's in these documents. Was personally acquainted with them. And that's where they got it out that the union was so much against discriminating so much against the people that taking if they got this particular document, was the one was front leaders in the. In other words, they was leader of the bunch, And that's the reason why that they give them this specific document. The others, they just asked them to vacate at the earliest possible time.
Okay. Very good. That's excellent.
I think.
Okay.
Okay. Now, could you describe to me again, when the national strike was called, what happened in East Noonan?
What happened in East Noonan? In East Noonan, what happened when the national strike was called in East Noonan was the flying squad come through and closed the mill down, but they didn't stay when they closed the mill down, so they just went on, and everybody around East Noonan went home except a few that joined the flying squad and went on to the other mill to shut them down. Everybody else just went on back home, and, let it run as it wanted to, so. In other words, it went back to sort of as a normal situation. They didn't do anything other than that. Just go. Didn't try to do any violence or do anything to the mill property or anything like that.
Did they leave pickets in East Noonan?
Yeah, they left pickets at the gates. Yeah, you had pickets on at each gate of every one of the mills. And in other words, they had about 3 gates, I believe it was, and they had pickets at each gate. So, say 4, 5, 6 people walked up and forwards. And they had what they call picket sticks, they toted on the shoulders, and that's just, in other words, just walking backwards and forwards, and telling if anybody tried to go in the gate or anything, come up to go in the gate, had a key, they'd just bunch up in front of the gate and wouldn't let them through.
How long did that last?
Well, that didn't last. I don't think that lasted, but just a very short time, maybe a couple of weeks, something like that. I'm not sure about that. Now, I just wouldn't possibly say how long it lasted, but it wasn't too long, because they got the injunction. The mill companies got the injunction, and they went right on back to operating. And they give each employee at that particular mill, if you come in by a certain date, you still had your job. The ones that it wasn't a leader in it, but if they didn't get in there by that date, then they didn't have a job. But there's some of them that they wouldn't even let come in for to give them a date on, like those that give them documents to.
Now, what was happening to you during this period of time? Where were you and what were you doing?
Well, I had my oldest daughter was only about 2 years old, and she was very sick, and I was at home most of the time with her, carrying to the doctor, one thing or another. So that's one of the reasons why I didn't know too much about what was going on, because I was combined at home with a sick child.
So now, how did they know? Well, talk about this. You were in the union and your brother was in the union.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how you're joining the union, what that did to your family life at home, and how that affected your family?
Well, it affected them in a certain way of causing unrest more than anything. The union of joining the union, unrest more than anything else, because you didn't know what was going to happen, and you and your family both was wondering whether you'd done the right thing, or whether you should have participated in it, or whether you should have taken the bigger hand, or just what you should have done. So more or less it just caused an unrest in the family among, the immediate family members. And it didn't, I don't know, not in my particular family, it didn't cause anything like strife or violence, but it did cause, we did have some opposition and unrest more than anything else.